So today I wanted to talk about 5G, but I've probably heard quite a bit about 5G in a technical perspective. But I wanted to do a little bit of a discussion of how 5G is from a platform perspective and how 5G can help smart cities move along their journeys in their towns. So that's the view I wanted to at least talk about 5G. And it's first on, but before I talk more about 5G and how it unlocks the power of smart cities, is 3 dimensions of 5G I want to talk about before we go into it. One is the dimension of throughput. The 10 gigabits per second is huge. It is a massive amount of gigahertz and the throughput and capacity to have of 5G. The second piece, which is a very important part of the use cases we're about to talk about, is low latency. Less than a millisecond latency allows you to do the VR, AR applications, allows the network slicing, and the low latency allows you to do the autonomous vehicle tracking and the management. Oh, can you hear me? Oh, can you hear me better now? No. Yes, in the back? No? Once again, thumbs up in the back, I can hear it. Can you hear me better now? Can you hear me now? Yeah. No? Yes? Maybe? Well, if I get a thumbs up in the back, then I can, I'll continue. Great. So this triangle is important. The throughput, the latency, the less than 1 millisecond latency is incredibly important to enable some of these applications around this chart. And the last one is scale, massive scale of adoption of devices feeding you in bursts. So the scale piece of it I would talk about more in the smart city examples. But these 3 components is the first time we see a technology that can do a step change and change what mobile technologies means, not for consumers necessarily, but mobile technologies means for all industries, not just the industries that we serve today. So that's a key piece here. And the industry here is smart cities, the people, the businesses, and governments that serve the cities today. So with that, we did a study last year at Accenture around smart cities. The study was in 3 components. Component 1 was around the enablement and economic benefit. The second component of it, what are some use cases that are practical today? And the 3 of them I will go through. And the third one was, what are some regulations that need to change within the cities to adopt 5G faster? Because that's what's happening in the next 2 or 3 years. It needs to be a frictionless environment in some of these municipalities, towns, but also cities. And so with that, on the economic side of it, so we did analysis of the next 7 years, about $275 billion in investments from telcos to cable companies. That will probably make Wall Street analysts a little bit afraid of that and what the return on investment will happen there. But then the second piece of it, how many jobs that will create. So we calculated about 3 million jobs that will create over the next 7 years. I don't know if you hear me. Tell me if you're not hearing me in the back. So. And the next piece is how much economic output. So we did the economic output from a North America perspective, but also by state, by congressional district. And what's the economic impact of these deployments happening? So we have that study. We can go into depth potentially later today. And the next one is on the use cases. 3 use cases I'm going to talk about. One is energy and utilities. The second is transportation. And the last one is public health and public safety, and how these 5G use cases can really matter in those 3 areas. And the last one is regulations. And regulations in 3 components. How to improve the local permitting process is a key piece. Right away, how to access right away in a faster way. Different today because the small cells are very different from the large macro towers. So the way you need to handle the cities, the way cities need to change the regulations would really help the telecom operators, but also the cities themselves. And the last one is the fee structure. The fee structure, because the smart cities, and the cities are smarter than this, if they make that frictionless and make it more a la carte menu at a lower cost, then you can get the investments going faster. And I see that today working with my clients that are deploying these 5G networks today. So those are the use cases. So let me go directly to the use cases. On the smart cities and utilities, so there's a lot of examples, but let me pick a city. Chattanooga. Chattanooga created a smart grid capability recently. And just in one measure, one storm, they were able to save $1.4 million in one storm by having a smart grid infrastructure tackled with a 4G network. and to be able to detect what was happening in the city and then reduce the duration it took to get power back into certain communities. That was one small example. But imagine if you add layer 5G and the amount of sensors, if you scale the number of sensors across all of Chattanooga, then an entire city and community around it can take benefit of one portion of the city received by deploying a smart grid with 4G. And another piece of it is lighting. Barcelona, the city of Barcelona in Spain, as well as San Diego, have started doing smart lighting and controlling lighting in areas where it's very densely populated. Increase the lighting aperture. But when there's nobody around, let's decrease the lighting infrastructure. So you save money. $1.9 million they save a year by being able to control how much light is provided to certain communities, depending if there's anybody around or is necessary. Still keep in mind public safety. So imagine an entire state or an entire one section of the U.S. with all these sensors that can control the lighting, the amount of benefits you receive. And with 5G and network slicing, which is a key component of it, allows you to do that in a bigger way. If you go into now the transportation side of it, really interesting here in the transportation piece of it. We did some analysis and studies around if you're able to transport the airflow and have NASCAR today, NASCARs, the cars are really closely together. You have a convoy of cars going through Interstate 85 and make sure that the distances are very short, then the amount of fuel consumption would decrease by 25% in a certain region. So imagine if you were living in Gwinnett County and now you're right behind somebody by 2 or 3 feet, but it's an autonomous vehicle, so you're not really dealing with having the human element component to it. So where does 5G fit in there? It's network slicing and ability to provide all that capability and bandwidth to controlling those vehicles. That's one piece. Parking, you see a lot about parking and sensors. That's a big area, and especially when I go to New York, parking is a big issue. But especially that use cases are very focused in specific communities, and how do you make that in a bigger way with more sensors. Last one is public safety. There's 2 examples we saw in public safety. One was in Chicago, one was in San Francisco. In San Francisco, they're decreasing crime rates in certain neighborhoods by 50% by being able to detect when a gun is shot, by putting sensors in an area. But that's a very small pocket of sensors that they have in one specific section of San Francisco. Imagine all of San Francisco, the whole Bay Area with these sensors. When a gun goes off, immediately that information gets sent to different communities and first responders. But it's one small use case that's lasted for more than a year. It's been able to reduce crime by 50%. So imagine that's another use case there. Chicago, they're using 4G to provide video cameras in certain neighborhoods to reduce crime rates. But what if you put 5G and the sensors that provide additional facial recognition to understand what's happening in more real time and provide the information to first responders? That will reduce the crime rate, especially in some parts of the neighborhoods there the crime rate is really, really high. So there's a lot of use cases that we've worked in the study that we have depthness and analysis behind that we'd love for you to share more. But these are three different use cases that are relevant if you scale with 5G, but the cities need to partner in a different way. Lastly, in Atlanta. So recently, we partnered with Atlanta to create a vision for Atlanta and how they tackle smart cities. The vision was comprehensive. How does Atlanta tackle partners, the ecosystem, the vendors, and public-private partnerships? Because a lot of the stuff I just talked about requires money. It requires investments. But if you don't have a different way, and a lot of cities don't have enough money, and they don't have the budgets to tackle this themselves. They need partnerships with telcos from the infrastructure side of it. But more than that, they need app developers, the one we just saw recently as well. But how do you tackle the entire community and make it a community issue, not just a city issue?